Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the post All-Star break prediction show. How many points per game will Ant average? Can he get to 30 per game? What would that take? Also, how many wins will the Wolves have? Where will they finish in the West? Also predict where their offense and defense finishes. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves have not played in 8 days. We'll preview the Wolves-Rockets matchup tonight toward the end of the show today. But this is the post-All-Star break prediction show. I'm going to give you 4 different predictions. Then we'll preview Wolves-Rockets, a packed show today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can also subscribe to the daily Locked On Wolves newsletter via email, lockedondaily.com. One-stop shop for all things Wolves and NBA to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. Sign up at lockedondaily.com. All right, let's go ahead and get into my predictions here. And this is a ton of fun. I would say a couple of them are maybe a little bit, not outlandish, but maybe a little bit more bold. Nothing gets to me more than like the NFL Network preview show on every Sunday does like bold predictions. They're completely out there. Like they would never happen. Like somebody's going to get, 300 rushing yards in a game, like stuff like that. I'm not going to do that because you could just say anything if that's what you're going to do. These are semi-realistic things to predict, to discuss. I want to talk about the Anthony Edwards point per game thing. I mentioned this the other day on the show. Maybe a couple of times recently, like, hey, could Ant get to 30 points per game? And I decided to do just a little bit of math on that and, look at how feasible could this possibly be? Is it feasible at all? It's something that before the season I had said, look, I think there's a shot he could make the leap from, what was he last year? About 26 points per game, 25.9 points per game. I thought he could make the leap to 30 if he shot a little bit more at the rim and a little bit more outside the arc. Well, we got half of that equation. He's shooting a lot more outside the arc. Almost 3.5 more 3-pointers per game. The most threes to date in the NBA this season, both makes and attempts. And we did not get the other half. He's not shooting more at the rim, although that's gone up here recently. The free throw rate's been down, right? So now, of course, leading into the break, minus the game he missed due to injury, he had those 3 consecutive 40-plus point games. He had the inefficient 28-point game, the loss to the shorthanded Bucks. And then he had a solid, albeit relatively inefficient game against the Thunder where he got to the line 11 times, but he was just 5 of 18 from the field for 23 points to OKC. So what looked like was trending way up, the free throw rate, the overall scoring, plateaued just a little right before the All-Star break. So I did some quick math. In order to get to 30 points per game on the season, he's currently at 27.5, which I should point out is a career high. It's gone up every year for him. 19 points per game as a rookie to 21 to 24.5 to basically 26 last year. 27.5 points per game to date. So in order to get to 30 per game, the Wolves he's missed 2 games so far. The Wolves have 27 games left. Assuming he misses a couple of games, and I think he will. He's actually questionable for the Rockets game, although it seems like he'd probably play Friday night. Say he misses 2 more. The Wolves have 4 more back-to-back sets, whatever. He would have to average almost 37 points per game. Nope, that's not right. I read 34.6 and rounded up to 37. Basically 35 points per game over the last 25 games he plays. So he'd have to average 35 points per game over 25 games in order to get to 30 points a game. I'm not going to predict that. I think that would be really challenging to average 35 a game for Ant, especially he's a little dinged up. There are some games that should be easier games on the schedule where he may not have to do that, hopefully. And then you add Julius, Randle, Dante DiVincenzo coming back into the mix. I think instead, Ant would only need to average about 31.5 points per game if he plays 25 of the remaining 27 games, and he would boost that scoring average from 27.5 per game to 29 per game. So I'm predicting that Anthony Edwards makes the leap from a 26 point per game score last year to a 29 point per game score this year. Next year will be the 30 point per game leap. So to recap, he's got average 31.5 points per game over the last 25 games that he plays this year, assuming he doesn't play 27, which I think is a fair assumption. He'll get to 29 points per game. So my prediction is Ant finishes this season averaging 29 points per game. I think that's what he does. And then we'll kick the 30 point per game average prediction to next year. I think that's completely on the table. It's completely feasible. All right. My next one, I'm going to hit two right here off the top of the first segment. My next prediction is that the Wolves finish the season with a top 10 offensive unit and a top 10 defensive unit. Remember, last year they finished like 16th or 17th in offense. They were, of course, number one in defense. This year they've been top 10 in defense for most of the season, although they're sixth right now. They're currently 14th in offensive rating. I'm going off of cleaning the glass numbers. Okay, cleaning the glass filters out garbage time. It filters out heaves, end of quarter possessions, when there's just a couple seconds on the clock, stuff like that. So cleaning the glass has the Wolves 6th in defense and 14th in offense. They've been on a steady climb in the offensive rankings. For some context, it's fairly rare for a team to be in the top four. Like the very best teams in the league, in the top 10 in both categories. Last season, the only four teams to finish in the top 10 in both offense and defense were Boston, who finished first in offense and third in defense. Oklahoma City last year, who remember did get the 1 seed in the West, they finished third in offense and fourth in defense. Denver finished fifth in offense and ninth in defense. Remember, Denver was the 2 seed right in front of the Wolves. And the Knicks last year finished 7th in offense and 10th in defense. This year, there's only 4 teams currently that are in the top 10 on both offense and defense. OKC is this year they're 5th in offense, but they're number 1 in defense. Cleveland's 1st in offense and 8th in defense. Boston is 4th and 5th. Memphis is 4th. They can't both be 4th. I wrote one of those down wrong. Boston's 4th and 5th. Memphis is let's see. Where did I go wrong on this? Memphis is 6th. I wrote down 4th. They're 6th and 7th, respectively, in offense and defense. So the Wolves would be the 5th team. There's currently 4 teams in the top 10 on both sides of the floor. Last year, there were 4. And look at it this way. Last year, it was the top seed in the East in Boston and a top, I don't think the Knicks were the 2 seed in the East, but maybe they were a top 3 seed in the East, at least in the Knicks, and then the top 2 seeds in the West. This year, you're talking the 3 best teams in the league, bar none, in some order, in OKC, Cleveland, and Boston, probably in that order, and then Memphis, who's been great. I think the Wolves can do it. They've been on such a steady increase in their offensive efficiency since the first of the year. We talked about this in a couple different shows this week, so I don't want to go too in the weeds on that. But I mean, like I want to reiterate that it's plausible. I mean, they're 6th in offense since January 1st, nearly 120 points per 100 possessions. The Wolves are 1st in free throw rate. They're 5th in offensive rebound rate. They're 10th in effective field goal percentage. The turnovers haven't gotten a whole lot better, but they're better across the board otherwise. They're taking better shots. They're getting to the line more frequently. They're running when it's advantageous. They're picking their spots, yes, but they're running when it's advantageous. 6th in offense since the first of the year. I think they can climb another 4 spots and be in the top 10 on both ends of the floor and join the best teams in the league, Boston, OKC, Cleveland, and Memphis, as the only teams that are in the top 10 on both sides of the floor. I think it's completely plausible. I really do. Okay, so Ant will get to 29 points per game, which means he's got to average 31.5 per game over his last 25. The Wolves will finish in the top 10 on both ends of the floor. I think the defense will stay there. Maybe we'll even get a little bit better as they get healthier. I've got 2 more for you, and then we'll look at the Rockets Timberwolves preview for tonight's game. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game throughout the season, from here on out, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. There's several ways you can take advantage of the deal. If somebody scores 50 points, say tonight, the next day, celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, burgers, whatever it might be from your favorite spot delivered right to your door. Maybe it's a late night craving. You're staying up watching highlights. You need a midnight snack. Could be lunch on the go. on a Saturday, right? Tomorrow, you need a quick and easy lunch. With Dash Pass, you can get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, now you save even more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight the next day after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right, my next two predictions here for the final, not technically the second half, the final 26 games of the regular season, the post-All-Star break stretch of the schedule. I've already given you my Ant scoring prediction. I've given you my Wolves top 10 offense and defense. Now I'm going to give you my Timberwolves record the rest of the season. There's 27 games left. I said 26 a minute ago. There's 27 games left. I think the Timberwolves will get to 51 wins this season. This is probably the boldest of the predictions. That would mean the Wolves would need to go 21-6 the rest of the way. Now, I talked about this, I think, on Monday's show earlier this week, that the Timberwolves have a bottom 5 strength of schedule the rest of the way, meaning, depending on where you look, the 4th or 5th easiest remaining schedule. They've got plenty of winnable games out there. And while I recognize that the Wolves have not played well against bad teams, I think there's some flukiness there. I think there's some bad luck. I think they've been shorthanded when facing bad teams. I think that they just weren't in a good place to start the year. I think they're trending in the right direction. It's get down to business time, right? So, like, yeah, right out of the break is tough. Houston, OKC, Lakers. That's very tough. Then you go, though, you go Utah, Phoenix, Philly, all teams below 500. Charlotte, below 500. Miami traded Jimmy Butler. San Antonio, terrible news on Thursday that Wemby's out the rest of the year with the blood clot in his shoulder. That's 6 straight games against below 500 teams. Yeah, Philly, Phoenix, those teams might get to the play-in. Miami, fine. But all games the Wolves will be favored in. Denver's tough. Then you get Orlando, who's been up and down. You get Utah, which you should win. Indiana's tough. 2 straight games against the Pelicans. Indiana again. Phoenix again. Detroit, they need some revenge. I know Detroit's better. They shouldn't have lost them in the fashion they did in early January. Then you go Denver, tough. Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Memphis is tough. You finish with Brooklyn and Utah. The fact that they still have 2 games against Philadelphia, they still have a game against Charlotte, they have 2 games against Utah. 3 games against Utah. I think 21-6 is on the table. There's 4 back-to-backs. That's obviously a wild card. You still have to play OKC twice, but it's right out the gate. Like if they come out and go 2-1 in the Houston OKC gauntlet here, or even if they go 2-2 against Houston, OKC twice in LA, I still think it's feasible for them to go 21-6 the rest of the way. I think there's been flukiness in close late games. I think they'll play better against bad teams. And I think they'll be motivated to try and get to a top 4 seed in the West. And by the way, part of this prediction is I think they get the 4th seed in the West. I know I said this on yesterday's show with Andrew Dukowitz. Last year, the 4th seed in the West did win 51 games. It was, I think, the Clippers last season won 51 games and got the 4th seed in the Western Conference. With how good the West is, that's certainly on the table. Like it's certainly plausible that the 4th seed could have 51 wins in the Western Conference, and add in that the Wolves are in really good position to win tiebreakers in the West. They're currently, let's see, they've got the lead on Houston, which tonight they play Houston. If they beat the Rockets, they'll have the tiebreaker against Houston. They've got the lead on the Lakers. They've got the tiebreaker wrapped up with the Clippers. They've got the lead on the Mavericks, I believe. The Kings won. Where are they with the Kings? I think they won the tiebreaker with the Kings. I think they won 3 out of 4, or they split. They didn't lose it. So like all the important tiebreakers are on the table still, or the Wolves have them. Minnesota has the 2nd best conference record next to only OKC, a better win percentage, more wins than any other team in the Western Conference. They've struggled against the East, which isn't great because, again, they've left stuff on the table because of those silly struggles against bad teams, against teams resting players, against teams with injured stars. So, yes, they've hurt themselves, no question. But I think that bounces back the other way a little bit. I'm predicting a 21-6 post-All-Star break run, a 51-win season. I just realized my math is off. Perfect. Great. How's my math off? 26. I'm off by 1. They have 26 games left. What did I say? 27? I'm off by a game. I'll say they go 20-6 the rest of the way, get to 51 wins. So there, even easier. 20-6 the rest of the way. I just realized that I somehow missed a game in there. I think they go 20-6 the rest of the way. I think that they finish with 51 wins. Still 5 wins off last year's, win total. But I think they'll pace ahead of what they did in the first half. All right, let's do my last one. My last one is rotation related. This one's admittedly a bit murkier, and it's not quite as neat and tidy as some of these other ones where there's like a real number. I was trying to think of something related to Rob Dillingham or Jalen Clark / Mike Conley. I do think, and I'll give my thought process here. I think Mike Conley is going to play less in the second half of the season, both from a load management, if you will, perspective, from a rest perspective. I mean, he's questionable again for tonight's game. There's a real chance he doesn't play. He didn't play the last few games headed into the All-Star break. I think they'll be more cautious with him to try and keep him fresh. We know how important he is and how good he was against Phoenix and until he got hurt in the Denver series last year. And then the rest of the playoffs, he was really bad. And he was bad at the start of this year. And how much of that is the finger? How much of it is, or I guess it was the wrist at the time. Now it's the finger. How much of it is age? How much of it is both, or his routine being thrown off by the injury? I don't know. But I think the Wolves will try and load manage him to an extent and play him less, even in the games he's available for. I think that means more opportunities for Rob Dillingham. And now it also means more opportunities for Jalen Clark, potentially even Terrence Shannon. I don't think it would be a realistic prediction for me to say Rob Dillingham is going to average more minutes per game than Mike Conley in the second half of the season. I don't think that happens. I don't necessarily think it'll happen for Jalen Clark or Terrence Shannon either. But I think what I'll say here for my prediction is that Chris Finch has a more fluid rotation for the final 26 games of the season. I think it won't be a here's my 9 or here's my 8 with like Josh Minot or Rob Dillingham getting a couple minutes here and there, or Luka Garza. I think it will be a much more fluid rotation. It's been a bit out of necessity due to injury, but some of these young guys, they've all had great moments between Clark and Dillingham and Shannon. Jalen Clark had that 2-3 game run that was crazy. And then he struggled offensively the final couple games before the break. Terrence Shannon came on the final couple games before the break. I think the combination of those 3 guys, I think we're going to be in a place for most of the second half of the year or post All-Star break schedule that 2 out of the 3 of them are playing regularly. And I think it's going to change each night. As much as Chris Finch hasn't done that this year, I think we're going to be in a place where Chris Finch is playing matchups more frequently, is determining who's playing more based on a little bit of the hot hand. But again, I think matchups is going to influence it. I mean, you can look at the second half of last year post trade deadline. Right? The Wolves acquired Monte Morris to be the primary backup point guard, and he was initially. But there were enough injuries and there were enough struggles for Monte Morris at times. Like, I know he shot the ball well, but he never really caught a groove. He'd been hurt early in the season. And, after the deadline, he was a regular member of the rotation initially. And then there were stretches where he just wasn't, and he was losing time to Jordan McLaughlin. Like right after the deadline last year, he was averaging, he had a couple games over 20 minutes a game. It was more frequent. He got dinged up a little bit. And the last couple games of the regular season, Jordan McLaughlin was playing ahead of Monte Morris. We saw that a little bit in the playoffs too, early in the playoffs. So I think Chris Finch may experiment a little bit here. I think we may see some push and pull with some of these young guys coming on and playing well, fresh legs, trying to protect Mike Conley. Nikhil's obviously great. And the other day we talked about how he's been super consistent. And I know Chris Finch loves Nikhil, but depending on the matchup, I mean, if Jalen Clark's going to give you a similar amount of offense, which I don't know that he would in a larger sample, but to this point he has, and he's defending just as good. I'm not saying he's going to play over Nikhil, but you've got options if you want to rest guys, give guys less minutes. And I think Chris Finch is going to be more want to do that here in the final couple months of the regular season now that he's seen some of these guys have success. So this isn't a neat and tidy number for you, but I think Chris Finch will be more flexible with his rotation. Once Julius Randle's healthy, like Luka Garza's out of the rotation, obviously. But I think even once, Ant's fully healthy, I guess you could factor in the fact he'll probably sit a couple of games as well. But Mike Conley gets back on the floor. DiVincenzo's healthy. I still think they're going to find a way to to play Jalen Clark, Rob Dillingham, and I think Clark may be number one on this list. Clark, Dillingham, and Shannon more frequently as part of the rotation because of what they've proven to this point, and it's going to help spell some of these other older guys. All right. Let's close by talking Wolves Rockets. We'll peek ahead at the next week of games as well. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using the live betting feature at FanDuel because it keeps every moment of the game excited. If you're backing the Wolves for a late-game rally, which, they haven't succeeded on a lot of those this year, but they have here and there. And I think they will, back to my prediction earlier, in the second half of the season. Or maybe you're just picking a player such as Ant to hit a clutch three. You'll never feel like you missed your chance with FanDuel. Plus, the app is easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Wolves Rockets tonight. So the last time the Wolves played the Rockets was only a couple of weeks ago, almost exactly. It was the week before the week of the NBA All-Star break. The Timberwolves squeaked out. Well, actually, they ended up winning by 13. It was a close game. There was the Dylan Brooks thing, right? Like Dylan Brooks doing Dylan Brooks things. There was Ant going back at him. That was great. It was a really fun matchup. And the Wolves ended up winning that game by 13 points. Ant had 41 in that game. I think we can hope for more of the same in terms of fireworks. Injury report wise, I mentioned this kind of in passing a little bit ago. Julius Randle's still out. Dante DiVincenzo's still out. Although it was reported earlier this week, John Krasinski I guess this was just Thursday. John Krasinski reported that DiVincenzo's been cleared for non-contact injury, hopefully not non-contact injuries, non-contact basketball activities. Julius Randle was cleared to play 5-on-5 with the groin injury. Both are out against Houston. So Randle being cleared to play 5-on-5 means he's going to try and play back into shape a little bit. They've got a back-to-back with OKC Sunday, Monday. So maybe he plays in one of those games, like give him Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. Maybe Randle's back in shape and ready to get out there. Second night of a back-to-back, spell some teammates and play against OKC on Monday night. I'm speculating, but that feels like it could be on the table if he's been cleared for 5-on-5. Maybe he's still a week out. I don't know. DiVincenzo just being cleared to do non-contact activities feels like he's at least a week, if not 2 weeks out still. So we might be right kind of in the middle of that initial range that they were considered his injury timeline. So no DiVincenzo, no Randle. Conley, Edwards, and Gobert are all questionable. Remember, Conley and Gobert missed the last game before the break. Ant played, but he had missed a game a few days before that. And then, of course, he missed the All-Star game itself with the reported as the groin injury, groin soreness, although the injury he's on the report for is a hip soreness, which is what he missed the game with against the Wizards a couple of weeks ago. So, Krasinski, he speculated on Twitter that maybe Conley sits and Gobert and Ant are true game time decisions. He said that Ant and Gobert are more likely to play and Conley's probably a game time decision. That feels about right. I mean, Gobert was a true game time decision, missed his first game of the year in that last game before the break. So I'm sure that this was all precautionary. It's his back. Feels likely that he would play. I don't see Ant missing a chance to play against the Rockets and Dylan Brooks again. On the Rocket side, still no Fred VanVleet. He's out with the sprained ankle. When the Wolves, Tari Eason will be back. He missed some time right before the break, but he'll play. And when the Wolves played the Rockets last, VanVleet didn't play either. The Wolves won by 13 points. This game, of course, is in Houston. And the Wolves won in Houston by a point right after Christmas. They lost at home in overtime to the Rockets right before Thanksgiving. And then they beat the Rockets by 13 points here a couple of weeks ago at Target Center. Remember, Ant had 41. The Wolves did a really good job of limiting. They kind of beat the Rockets at their own game in a sense when it came to offensive rebounding. Minnesota with 18 offensive rebounds in that game. Jaden had 5, Gobert had 3, Naz had 4 in a starting role. There was, of course, no Randle in this game either. Naz had 15 and 11, Gobert had 13 and 10, Jaden had 12 and 8, and Ant had 41, 7 and 6. And then off the bench, this was Jalen Clark's breakout. He had 17 points, shot 4 of 6. The Rockets kept leaving him open, and he was effective defensively as well. This was like we saw TJ Shannon rotation minutes. I mean, this was only 4 games before the break. It feels like it was a month ago, but so I don't see why this game would be a whole lot different. The Wolves are underdogs at FanDuel. I think it was it was a higher line than I thought it was. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick here in a moment. But kind of the same scouting report that we had a couple of weeks ago as the Wolves take on the Rockets. Like, this is a Houston team that is the best offensive rebounding team in the NBA. And that's why I said the Wolves beat them at their own game last time out. That's a difficult thing to do. Houston's number 1 in offensive rebounding, which scares me. That's their best kind of thing they do on offense. They're not great at many other things. Defensively, they're pretty middle of the pack as well. They do a good job at turning you over and making you pay in transition, which is a concern when it comes to the Wolves, given how they've struggled at times with transition defense and overall pace wise. The Rockets don't actually play that fast. They're just opportunistic. They turn you over at a decent clip, and when they turn you over, they can go down and score on the other end. So that's something to keep an eye out. So recapping my keys to the game: keep the Rockets off the offensive glass, which they did last time. And again, Houston's best in the league at offensive rebound rate. Don't turn the ball over. Houston will be opportunistic and can hurt you in that regard. And don't get sucked into complaining about the refs, worried about Dylan Brooks, some of the silly stuff that Houston can make you do, that Dylan Brooks can make you do, that the Wolves can do to themselves when it comes to technical fouls and worrying about the officiating. Minnesota just has to be smarter than that in this game, and that's a genuine concern of mine, really. As of right now, Houston is a 4.5-point favorite against the Wolves in Houston on Friday night. So Wolves 4.5-point underdogs. It's a little higher than I would have thought. The Wolves are a 0.5-point favorite in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, with the injury report looking similarly. I guess now with both Gobert, Ant, and Conley are all questionable, so that's probably influencing it a little bit. But assuming 2 out of the 3 of them play, and if Ant plays, that number really should be more like 1.5, 2, 2.5 at most, I would think. So anyway, we'll have the live postcast following Wolves Rockets. It'll be at the Locked On Sports Minnesota channel on YouTube, and then we'll have the audio right here at Locked On Wolves. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves, and you'll be able to find the postcast as well. If you can't watch it live Friday night, you can catch the audio after the fact. I'll be back Monday. Monday will be more of it will be a post-game pod from Sunday's game. The Wolves are at home against OKC Sunday night, one of those dreaded one-game homestands that the Wolves will have. So at Houston Friday, home for OKC Sunday, and then at OKC Monday night. So I'll be back on Monday talking about Wolves Thunder from Sunday. So that's going to be a ton of fun as well. Of course, the Wolves beat OKC leading into the All-Star break in that inefficient Ant game. No Rudy, no Mike Conley, 15-point win. Really fun. We'll see how they do at home against OKC on Sunday. Again, we'll talk about that on Monday's show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A big thank you for making us your first listen. And a reminder, you can subscribe on LockedOnDaily.com to the email newsletter. It'll hit your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. Again, LockedOnDaily.com for your one-stop shop for all things Wolves and NBA. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.